During the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, Nazi Germany began its conquest of Europe, invading several nations including Greece, Yugoslavia, Denmark, Norway, Austria, Poland, the Netherlands, Czechoslovakia, Belgium, France, and Britain. The swift defeat of Poland in just 27 days was followed by Denmark's surrender in less than 24 hours. Even France, known for having the strongest army in Europe, held out for only 39 days. While Europe was falling apart, the question arises, where were the noble monarchs during this time? King Christian X of Denmark serves as an example of royalty taking a stand against Nazi aggression. On April 9, 1940, Germany violated the non-aggression pact with Denmark and launched an attack. Despite being a small nation with less than 10% of Germany's population and area, Denmark became a partner state after just one day of fighting. However, King Christian X refused to flee the country and instead stayed with his people to engage in direct negotiations with Nazi Germany during the occupation. Hitler was even forced to meet with the King of Denmark when he arrived at Hitler's door. Recognizing the close relationship between the Danish and Aryan races, Hitler saw it as more advantageous to turn Denmark into a model protectorate rather than completely exterminating the population. The king knew that he couldn't simply act as a puppet king. To maintain a sense of sovereignty and nationalism among the Danish people, King Christian X rode through the streets of Copenhagen every day. This act of bravery and leadership shows the important role that royalty can play during times of crisis. It wasn't just the King of Denmark who resisted seeking asylum overseas. In 1940, Germany overran France after breaching the Maginot Line. This alarmed a Belgium that had little defense. When German paratroopers stormed the Belgian citadel, the Belgian leadership already realized it had lost the war, and on May 24, 1940, after much deliberation, the Belgian government chose to escape en masse to Britain. Leopold III, the Belgian king at the time, had a different outlook than the administration. He concluded that surrendering to the Germans was the best course of action because the British and French forces were unable to defeat them. The king made it clear that if the government left, he would surrender as king alone. Hubert Pierlot, the Belgian prime minister at the time, was displeased by the king's action. He gave the king an immediate warning that only the government could decide to surrender. Despite these arguments, Leopold III was still determined to surrender his army to the Nazis. When it became clear that the government could not challenge the king, it established a government in exile abroad. When Belgian, British, and French troops were surrounded at Dunkirk in May 1940, Leopold III sent a telegram to King George VI on May 25 to inform him that Belgium's friendship with Allied forces had ended. On May 28, at 4 a.m., the king announced Belgium's surrender. The quick surrender of Belgium was very damaging to the Allies. Britain was busy planning the well-known Dunkirk evacuation at the time. The abrupt departure of Belgium left the Allies scrambling to fill a gap on the left side of the defense line. To replace the shortfall in the Belgian army, the already overstretched British army was forced to send out a sizable contingent of troops. Leopold III, the man who started it all, was roundly condemned by his fellow countrymen as well as the leaders of Britain and France. In a radio broadcast in France, his Prime Minister, Hubert Pierlot, charged him with violating the Constitution. On May 28, Paul Reynaud, the Prime Minister of France, vehemently condemned his capitulation. In a speech to the British House of Commons, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill also accused him of sending an unapproved emissary to the German command to demand surrender. Leopold III, who resisted leaving, was reduced to nothing more than a defeated king. We previously mentioned that the Germans captured Denmark in a single day. However, Norway rather than Denmark was the goal of the German army's northward advance. Across the Skagerrak Strait, Norway was now within striking distance. Soon after, the Nazis headed north to attack Norway. As soon as the Germans arrived in Oslo, the Norwegian royal family and cabinet were evacuated. They fled first to Hammer, which is located 97 kilometers north of Oslo, and then continued to Elverum. The Norwegian territory stretched to the North Pole, but the king couldn't take it anymore. In desperation, King Haakon of Norway received the German diplomats. The German diplomats informed King Haakon that while an armistice was a possibility, Hitler's demands had to be complied with. Vidkun Quisling needed to be named Prime Minister, and Norway needed to put an end to all resistance. The leader of the fascist party in Norway is this Vidkun Quisling. Only a few hours prior, in Oslo, he had formally proclaimed himself the country's Prime Minister. Norway would be destroyed if this man were given legal access to power. Furthermore, the Norwegian army possessed the ability to resist. King Haakon and the Norwegian cabinet ultimately turned down the German request and stayed in exile. Hitler had never been so roundly rejected before. He decided to assassinate the Norwegian king and government in a fit of rage. The small town of Nybergsund, where the Norwegian government and king are located, was attacked by Luftwaffe bombers on April 11, 1940. The Norwegian king and government were forced to flee once more. Only 16 miles separated the small town of Nybergsund from Sweden. King Haakon and his group had intended to flee to their friendly neighbor Sweden to get away from Nazi Germany's bombs. However, ostensibly neutral Sweden was in league with Germany and ordered that King Haakon of Norway and his ministers be arrested if they crossed the border. The King of Norway and his ministers had no choice but to take refuge in the snow-covered woods. It was a long journey by day and they had to watch out for wild animals at night. However, the Germans pursued even harder and soon looked set to catch up with the king and his ministers. King Haakon and his ministers had to travel 1,000 kilometers north on a British cruiser to Tromsø, where they set up a temporary capital on the 1st of May 1940. In the end, King Haakon and Crown Prince Olav had to leave their country behind and come to Britain, where they formed a government in exile. However, the Germans returned as soon as King Haakon arrived in London. Beginning in September 1940, air raids were launched on London, making the British capital unsafe. Later, the British government set aside a room in Winkfield for a Norwegian legation to assist the Norwegian royal family and government in settling in. Settled in, King Haakon attended his weekly cabinet meetings on time. And he prepared for the regular speeches broadcast to Norway by the BBC World Service. These broadcasts helped to cement King Haakon's position as an important national symbol of the Norwegian resistance. Even though the king and other important officials fled, Hitler had no intention of letting King Haakon go. Hitler attempted to remove the king twice but was rejected by the Norwegian parliament. He ultimately had to issue a directive to fascist officials in Norway declaring that the royal family had lost the right of return and dissolving the democratic parties. On May 10, 1940, the German military launched an invasion of the Low Countries and France, following the second month of their invasion of Norway. In response, Queen Wilhelmina of the Netherlands established her government in exile in Britain and appointed Charles Ruys de Beerenbroek, a war hero, as Prime Minister. Despite facing near death during a German bombing in Britain, the Queen refused to give up and used the radio to repeatedly speak to the people of the Netherlands, earning her portrait a place as a symbol of the Dutch resistance against Germany. To further the cause of the Allies, Queen Wilhelmina traveled to the United States in 1942 and gave a speech to Congress, and then to Canada the following year. Her unwavering spirit and dedication to the cause earned her recognition from Churchill, who referred to her as the only real man in the Dutch government. During World War II, various European monarchs had different experiences with the Nazi occupation. In Denmark, the king rode his horse through the streets every day despite the surface submission to Hitler. He secretly authorized the Danish ambassador to the United States to organize the resistance movement. After the German occupation took power in 1943, the king continued his daily parade until the German surrender. In Norway, people wore clothing or symbols with King Haakon's name as a symbol of resistance and solidarity with the exiled king and government. Upon the end of the war, King Haakon returned to Norway with a warm welcome but had difficulty with Sweden for refusing him entry. In the Netherlands, Queen Wilhelmina returned after the withdrawal of German troops and was celebrated as the mother of the resistance. However, King Leopold III of Belgium was not as fortunate. After surrendering to the Nazis, he was taken hostage and later imprisoned in Germany. When the Belgian government returned from exile in England, they decided they did not want Leopold III as their king, and his brother, Prince Charles, was made regent. Leopold III eventually reclaimed the throne but was forced to abdicate due to his Axis sympathies. The monarchs of the victorious countries were forced to abdicate, and the monarchs of the defeated countries were even worse, as the King of Italy demonstrated. In Italy, King Victor Emmanuel III was reduced to a puppet by Prime Minister Mussolini during the fascist regime. After the Allies entered Italy, intense conflicts between the workers' movement and the anti-fascist movement led to the king's abdication and exile in 1946. In a constitutional monarchy, even though the power to govern the country has been completely transferred from the monarch to the parliament, the monarch still plays an important role that is above politics. In such countries, the monarch is a symbol of personification of the country's sovereignty and national spirit. When the country faces invasion and division, the monarch should also bear the responsibility of uniting the people to resist. If even the king descends to the point of selling out the country, he will naturally be discredited when justice arrives.